competition on Japanese soil has ended, and after this race, Formula 1 will go on a mandatory break for more than a month. But it says goodbye with a Grand Prix that will definitely keep people talking for weeks, since we've had a race that followed the trend of the previous Grand Prix, with plenty of moves, but also with dangerous situations. After so much time and so many predictions, they have finally come true and appeared at the Suzuka circuit. The Grand Prix has ended and now we'll have to wait more than a month to see Formula 1 action again, but at least for now. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the recap of the third round of the Formula 1 World Championship at the Japanese Grand Prix. This time, unlike the first races of the year, we didn't have any surprises before the start of the Grand Prix. And for the first time, we would have all 22 cars ready and prepared with no penalties to start the race. But on Saturday, we had a qualifying session. This gave Kimi Antonelli a new pole position, as he beat Russell fairly with an impressive performance. His closest rival would be his British teammate, but this time, a surprising Oscar Piastri stole third place from the Ferrari drivers, being practically the best of the rest for this race. With Leclerc starting in 4th position and Hamilton starting 6th, it made us wonder if Ferrari would once again quickly take the top positions. The Japanese Grand Prix, which has become of the Japanese Grand Prix, and on Sunday afternoon, it was time to see and get all the answers to these questions. And once the cars lined up on the starting grid, the lights on the signal would go out, and with that, the Japanese Grand Prix would begin. As usual, the Mercedes cars were practically left standing, but this time it was Oscar Piastri who snatched first place from them, sending Antonelli down to 6th position, while Russell dropped to 4th behind Leclerc and Norris. Although, as usual, it didn't take Antonelli more than a lap to overtake Hamilton and take 5th position from him. Also up ahead, it wouldn't take Russell much time to overtake Lando Norris and move into 3rd position. With a good attack on the main straight, by lap 4 the British driver would overtake Charles Leclerc to move into 2nd place, getting ready to go on the attack against Oscar Piastri. But further back on the grid, we saw the Red Bull family as if they were fighting over their grandmother's land. Well, Hadjar and Verstappen were going all out, fighting for 9th position, with the Frenchman defending himself from his teammates' attacks. Although in the end, Verstappen managed to overtake him, settling this battle in his favor, where even the French driver ended up losing the position to his compatriot Esteban Ocon. And in this story called Energized Passion, Verstappen would later manage to overtake Arvid Lindgren to move up to 8th, leaving the fight for the will to the Racing Bulls driver and Isaac Hadjar. But before Hadjar could say to Lindblad, "You never looked out for Grandma," these two were about to go all out, trying to fight for that position. Up ahead, Antonelli was behind Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, but this time, unlike what happened in previous Grand Prix or even the battle with Hamilton, he wasn't able to overtake them and got stuck in a train behind these two without a clear opportunity to make a pass. However, it's not like Russell had it much easier, because by lap 8 he had already caught up to Oscar Piastri, but he couldn't overtake him. He tried it on lap 8 at the Casio Triangle chicane, but immediately on the main straight Piastri took the position back. The Australian driver's pace was very good, and even though his McLaren wasn't as fast compared to the Mercedes, he was heroically holding off George Russell's attacks. And it wasn't until lap 11 that Antonelli was finally able to pass Lando Norris to move up to 4th behind Charles Leclerc, and while this battle was going on, again, we saw the battle between Isaac Hadjar and Arvid Lindblad. No matter how much the Frenchman tried to make a move on the Brit, Lindblad defended himself, although he had to make several moves under braking that earned him a warning from the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. Nevertheless, he was holding on to his position as best he could in this fight for Red Bull Racing's territory. Back at the front, on lap 16, Antonelli tried to surprise Charles Leclerc at the Casio Triangle, but the Monegasque smartly held on and Senna came back on the main straight, defending his position. But right on that lap, the pit stop window opened and McLaren brought in Lando Norris on lap 17, looking to undercut both Antonelli and Charles Leclerc. Ferrari responded a lap later and brought in Charles Leclerc, preventing the McLaren driver from getting ahead after the pit stops. By lap 19, God knows how, but Piastri was still holding off George Russell, preventing the overtake and maintaining a safe gap that he had extended to 1.7 seconds. And knowing how important it was to keep track position, McLaren brought the Australian in on that lap, trying to avoid the undercut from the Mercedes team. The Germans, for their part, responded by pitting on lap 22, extending their stint a bit. Russell came out behind Oscar Piastri, but in the long run, he would have slightly fresher tires with which they would try to overtake him on track later in the race. By this point, Antonelli, Hamilton, Gasly, Verstappen and a few other drivers still hadn't pitted, but it's at this particular moment that Lady Luck appears, dressed in green, white and red. On the lap when the Italian driver was about to pit, a dangerous situation occurred further back in the field. Oliver Burman, who was chasing Franco Colapinto, had a spectacular accident at Spoon Curve which brought out the safety car. As the British driver was chasing the Argentine just before Spoon Curve, Franco's car suddenly went into recharge mode, losing speed abruptly. Burman was coming in with more speed at this point, and the sudden change in speed caught him by surprise. He tried to swerve to avoid contact with the Argentine driver, which caused him to lose control and led to a very dramatic crash into the wall. And Franco was very lucky, because if Burman hadn't managed to avoid him, Franco would have taken a really hard hit to the rear of his single-seater. Fortunately, Burman was not injured after this incident, and this led to the appearance of the safety car, which obviously Antonelli, Hamilton, Gasly, Verstappen, Lawson, Bortoleto and Carlos Sainz took advantage of to pit, allowing Antonelli to take the lead of the Grand Prix while Hamilton moved up to 4th position. In the same way, Gasly kept his position ahead of Verstappen, and Lawson, thanks to this, managed to get into the points, essentially being the big winners of this stroke of luck from the safety car. The neutralization ended on lap 27, and with that, the action of the race resumed. But here, once again, things would get complicated for George Russell, who was not at all happy with the stroke of luck his teammate had. Additionally, Hamilton overtook him on lap 28, dropping him to 4th place. Meanwhile, behind them, the show of Pierre Gasly would begin. Even though he had an aggressive Verstappen behind him, the Frenchman was not intimidated and held his position, defending with everything he had. No matter how much the Dutchman lined up his car and tried, he simply couldn't get past the Frenchman who, spoiler alert, had the Dutchman forced to read the sponsors on his rear wing practically the entire race in a titanic effort by the Alpine driver. But going back to the front, Russell was trying to overtake Hamilton, but he just couldn't get past him. And he was unlucky because on lap 37 before the Spoon Curve, he ran out of energy, which Charles Leclerc took advantage of to overtake him almost as if he was standing still, making the race even more difficult for him, which at this point was practically lost. But this also put Leclerc and Hamilton in the position of having to fight on track for what was virtually 3rd place and the last spot on the podium. For a few laps, Hamilton tried to hold him off, but on lap 42, no matter how hard he tried to resist, he ended up succumbing to the attack from his teammate, where Hamilton's pace dropped off almost suddenly. And this in fact caused Russell to also overtake him a lap later to move up into 4th position. Suddenly, the Briton's pace faded to the point that Norris also caught up to the rear wing of the Ferrari driver, although eventually on lap 52 Norris overtook him, with Hamilton practically unable to do anything to defend himself. By this point in the race, Antonelli had already given Oscar Piastri a thorough beating, taking his position on the track. He couldn't do anything against the Mercedes to try to fight for the Grand Prix victory. And the last action this race gave us was the battle for the final podium spot between George Russell and Charles Leclerc, where really, the British driver never had it easy to make the overtake. But on lap 51, he tried to surprise him in the Casio triangle, but very cleverly. Leclerc waited for him to recover the position in turn number 2 with an exquisite move on the outside, taking back the final spot on the podium. Also, thanks to this maneuver, he was able to put enough distance to avoid another attack and thus secure the last spot on the podium. But in the end, this Grand Prix was practically decided by the safety car. And when lap 53 arrived, Andrea Kimi Antonelli achieved his 2nd consecutive victory of the season by crossing the finish line first in the Japanese Grand Prix. 2nd victory of the season for the young Italian, who thanks to this result and George Russell's 4th place, becomes the leader of the World Drivers' Championship, breaking the record for the youngest driver to lead the Formula One World Championship in a race where, although it wasn't his best performance, he always had the pace, even better than his teammate. And that's what the Lady Luck appreciated, allowing him to finish a race where he no longer had any competition to take the victory. The rest of the top 10 of the Japanese Grand Prix would finish as follows. 2nd place for Oscar Piastri, who, if it hadn't been for the safety car, might have won the race. 3rd place and a brilliant race for a battling Charles Leclerc. 4th position and a disastrous Grand Prix for George Russell. 5th place for Lando Norris. 6th place goes to Lewis Hamilton, whose pace faded all of a sudden. 7th place and a standing ovation for Pierre Gasly. 8th place for Verstappen, who couldn't do anything more in this Grand Prix. 9th position for Liam Lawson, who benefited from the safety car, and closing out the top 10 Esteban Ocon taking the last point of this race. Look, I think this Grand Prix has generally followed the trend of the previous races. Chaos happens when the drivers end up falling out of their natural positions, and this allows for battles and brings life to the race, which at least ends up being eventful. I have to admit that even though I don't like the regulations and I have to watch the races with my common sense basically turned off, I found the Grand Prix entertaining with so many battles on track, but obviously it had its first dangerous situation with today's accident, Oliver Burman. My rating will be 7.5, it was an entertaining race. We'll have to see if any changes are made after this Grand Prix, but it's clear that the way of competing in this 2026 still feels strange. My drivers of the day this time are Antonelli, who, although it wasn't his best race, had an absolutely brutal pace, especially when compared to his teammate, Pierre Gasly, who held off Verstappen despite having him right behind for the entire race. My driver of the day is Oscar Piastri, who showed incredible pace. Without the safety car, the outcome could have been very different. My disappointment today is George Russell. While it's true that he was seriously affected by the safety car and when his car lost power before the spoon curve, it's also true that this weekend he has looked slower in pace compared to his teammate. He hasn't been able to pull off the move on Piastri at any point, which could have given him the victory, and he also hasn't managed to resolve the battle with Charles Leclerc, which at least could have given him third place in the race. A result like today's is not what you expect from the favorite for the world title, and he was beaten by a 19-year-old kid. He wasn't on many people's radar either, but we'll have to see how he bounces back for the next race. But at least this Grand Prix is one to forget for the British driver. And ladies and gentlemen, with this we finish the summary of the 2026 Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix. But this is where I ask you, what did you think of the race? Did you like it? Were you disappointed? Tell me who your drivers of the day were and who disappointed you in this 2026 Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix. Let me know all your opinions in the comments section. That's all from me. I'll say goodbye by telling you that if you liked this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so you know when I'm uploading a new video, and share this video. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter using the links in this video's description. See you soon for more content on Skyline Racing. Thank you for tuning in and see you later.